Rabbi Smith.
So yesterday we spoke about taking medicine on Shabbos, and I just wanted to read for you what I pulled up on the internet. So may Tylenol be administered to an infant who is running a fever on Shabbos? So this is a website called Halacha Yoimis. So he brings over here regarding taking Tylenol and the like. We have already explained that if one is so ill that one must lie in bed as a result of his pain or discomfort, one may take medication as needed. For the enactment against crushing herbs, which prohibits taking medicine on Shabbos, does not apply to one who is truly ill. Thus, although one may not act leniently to take Tylenol to relieve a minor discomfort of a light headache and the like, if one is truly ill and suffers from fever and major aches and pains, one may take such medications in order to relieve the pain and reduce the fever. And with regard to an infant, one may administer any medication necessary to a child under 9 years of age. This is especially true regarding infants, since an increase in body temperature poses a danger to them, must therefore quickly balance their body temperature. So that's one website. And the another website, a Chabad website, has concerning taking medication on Shabbos. So they write here, one may take medication to remove an infection if by non-treating the infection it could lead to a life-threatening situation, which would basically be infections. If there's a slight possibility of life-threatening situation, of course, everything is permissible. One who takes medication which preempts a life-threatening situation may continue to take it on Shabbos, even if skipping one dose would not result in a life-threatening situation. Now, the prohibition originally of taking medication had to do with grinding. We're afraid a person might end up grinding herbs to make a remedy, which would be a biblical prohibition. Nowadays, most people do not construct their own remedies. Nevertheless, the consensus of contemporary poskim, which means the halachic renders, those that the rabbis that render halachic decisions, their consensus is that we cannot undo a rabbinic prohibition, even if the reason is no longer applicable. So then he brings down there's different levels of pain. There's something called a michush kal, a mild malady, like a cold or a cough, a minor cold. In such a case, a person may not transgress any prohibition, meaning even rabbinic. Then there's something called a tsa'ar gadol, one who is in significant pain but is not weak or incapacitated. So he's in pain. Such a person may transgress a rabbinic prohibition in an unconventional manner, which would be like mixing medicine with one's foot, as long as that mixture was prepared before Shabbos. So he's just mixing it with, however, in the category of tsar gadol, a lot of significant pain, one may not take medication or undergo treatment except external treatment applied by a non-Jew. So this precludes Tylenol for manageable pain, or powder for a rash, Tums for heartburn, sucking lozenges for a sore throat. Some hold that one who is on a schedule of medicine for such an ailment may continue taking the dosage on Shabbos. So that's seems to be an argument if you're taking medication for like heartburn or a rash that you're on a schedule of medicine from before, if you could continue taking it. But then you have the shchela she'ein bo sakana, one who is in severe pain and cannot function, but it's not the danger of life, like a migraine headache. He may do a malacha in an unusual manner, which would be take medication, and could ask a non-Jew to perform something to perform work, to do something that's prohibited. Medication may be taken as soon as the pain begins, even if it is bearable at that time. And some poskim write that if the medication is thoroughly mixed before Shabbos into food, that is not a normal way to take medication when they eat that food on Shabbos. This is because he has actively distinguished it from normal medication, and therefore it won't think to prepare medication on Shabbos, and it looks different, so others won't think that medication is permissible. And this is the optimal solution for one who may experience heartburn or headaches on Shabbos. So this is seemingly a way to get around the problem of taking medication, is if you put it inside food before Shabbos, and that would be an option. Yes, Robert.
I thought long and hard since the last class relating to not taking medication on Shabbos when you're sick. And even now, when you just said that, even though in contemporary times, if a prohibition was in place and it's no longer practiced, you still have to observe that prohibition. I've been struggling with how do you then, what's the literature, the conversation on, it's essentially, it's a compromise of the celebration of Shabbos if you're in pain, because Shabbos is a celebration. And if we can't do it, then that degrades our experience for Shabbos. And I'm troubled by how you reconcile that.
Right. So what it boils down to is that is something that the rabbis took into consideration when they made the decree of not grinding medicine, not taking medicine on Shabbos because you might come to grind. Meaning, logically, what you're saying would make makes a lot of sense. That why shouldn't everyone take medicine on Shabbos so that you'll feel so happy? Why did the rabbis make this decree? And the idea is that logic that you're saying is exactly what the rabbis were dealing with when they decided they had a scale in front of them. And the scale was, on the one hand, we have a problem. There's going to be people who are going to end up grinding on Shabbos. On the other hand, we have the issue of, wouldn't it be nice to have people have medicine on Shabbos, even though it's obviously we're dealing with a non-essential medicine, but let them enjoy Shabbos to the fullest. So this is exactly what they were debating. In other words, it's not that they didn't think of your logic. That is exactly what they were thinking of. And they decided that because of the seriousness, the severity of the prohibition of the grinding on Shabbos, they chose that this would be an optimal option, the better option, and they chose to prohibit it. And the law is that once the rabbis prohibited something, we cannot go and undo it, even if the reason behind it doesn't apply. And the truth of the matter is, nowadays, everyone loves doing things on their own. So there's a lot of people that grind their own, make their own little tea or their own, it's interesting how things are becoming more actually, we can understand and relate to some of the things that the rabbis prohibited that maybe you didn't think applied so much in the past. Now they actually do apply, because a lot of people make their own little remedies. They make their own medicine. They'll make their own concoctions. everyone loves looking on YouTube and finding new ways, things to make. I'll make it. It'll be fresh. It won't have artificial flavors. It will be, it'll be my own. Everyone is trying to make their own stuff. So it actually is logical that someone might end up grinding something on Shabbos because they're so nervous about their heartburn. They're nervous about this, so they might end up grinding something. So the rabbis made that decree. So the point is that you have a very good question, and the rabbis thought of that was the rabbis' question. What you're thinking was what the rabbis had to decide, and it was not easy, I'm sure, for them to make that decision, because it definitely is a way of ruining in a certain sense the comfort of Shabbos. So it was a tough decision. I think, at least. Again, I wasn't there at the time, and they didn't. Even if I was there at the time, they wouldn't have invited me into their decision making. At least in my, I'm not. I wouldn't be.
You're not at that pay scale. Okay.
Exactly. Yes, Abraham.
What about psychiatric drugs?
Yeah, I would think that psychiatric medicine would probably be essential for life. I mean, people who don't take it, they could get very depressed. There's a lot of suicide, unfortunately, nowadays, and other types of they could do harm to themselves. So it would seem to me like, they also might, they might not be able to function at all. It could be like a sickness to the whole body. I mean, they could hurt other people. I would think that probably mental health, a medication for mental health would probably be acceptable. Again, I'm not I don't like to give like verdicts. So if anyone, if someone was to ask a question, they should of course ask their local Orthodox rabbi. But that would be my thought. Yeah. Okay. So the other thing that we were discussing was we discussed the law of making a mixture on Shabbos where it could be like a mixture of like kneading dough, and kneading dough is prohibited on Shabbos. And so we had it was mentioned as this drink that we're talking about, if it was a thick drink or a thin drink, if it was in the case was if you were going to mix it with a spoon, Brachas, if you're allowed to stir es hashatus, this drink, which we're calling shtisa, but the Brisa calls it shatus. It's the same root word. Are you allowed to mix it on Shabbos? And we said that you would be allowed to mix it on Shabbos, and the Gemara is mentioning that although there's an argument about pouring water into bran, but mixing shatus is not a problem. Everyone agrees that that's fine. So I just wanted to touch base and mention the practical application of that law is, would a person be allowed to use their hot water urn and make oatmeal, instant oatmeal on Shabbos? Now, a lot of people are familiar with the law that you're not allowed to cook something directly from hot water, directly from hot water poured from an urn, because that could really be cooking. And there's something called a kli sheni, the vessel that receives the hot water from the urn is called a secondary vessel. So it's it's once removed from the original vessel that it was cooked in. So again, the vessel that it's cooked in, like the hot water urn, is called a kli risha, in the first degree vessel. Then it's poured into a second vessel which is called which is the receiving vessel from the hot water urn. That would be called a kli sheni. And then there is a concept that there's no cooking in a kli shlishi. So if you pour that cup into a additional cup, then a lot of situations become permissible. And there might be a option to, like, a lot of people, in order to cook, to make coffee on Shabbos, what do? So they have a hot water urn. They have cup number one, a styrofoam cup, let's say, cup number one. They pour the hot water, they press the button, they pull the latch, the lever, and let the hot water from the urn go into cup number one. Then they pour cup number one into cup number two. And cup number two is called a kli shlishi. It's called the third degree. It's like it's removed from the original hot water. It's removed already, and it's in its third compartment. Why is it called kli shlishi? Because the hot water urn is called the first vessel. The cup number one is called the second vessel, and cup number two is called the third vessel. And so that's called the kli shlishi. So a lot of times in Shulchan Aruch and Jewish law and Gemara will mention that the kli shlishi in a third vessel, things don't cook. Why? Because it's already cooled off. Once you pour it into one cup, and then that cup pours into an additional different cup, it's already cooled off. The walls of the cup aren't hot anymore, and it's basically not going to cook anything. However, there are some exceptions to that rule. And one of the exceptions that's brought in the halachic Jewish books of law is oatmeal. Now, oatmeal has two problems. Instant oatmeal, you want to make instant oatmeal on Shabbos. Number one, we're worried that it will cook even in a kli shlishi, even in a third level vessel, it still could cook. And therefore, because it might be something that's considered a very easy to cook thing, it's similar, there's something called kale habishel, things that are very easy to cook. And they could cook even in things that so there's lenience, there's often leniency in a kli shlishi, in a third degree vessel. However, not in every situation. And there's room to say that you cannot make oatmeal on Shabbos because of cooking, even if you make the kli shlishi. Now, there's additional problem of kneading, of lush, which means kneading. Now, the way to get around the kneading issue would be if you put in a lot of water. If you had a lot of liquid, then it wouldn't be kneading. That's similar to what we're learning in our Gemara. Now, so bottom line is you cannot make we don't make oatmeal on Shabbos, but the way around the issue of kneading would be if you had a lot of liquid, because if it's a lot of liquid, it doesn't fall into the category of kneading dough on Shabbos. If it was a little liquid, then it would fall into the category of kneading liquid. However, so if it's not practical, why am I bringing this? Because there's a little trick, and that is it permissible to make overnight oatmeal on Shabbos? What is overnight oatmeal? Soaking rolled oats in cold water or milk and letting it sit overnight until it becomes somewhat soft. This is a completely cold process. It involves no cooking. So there's no issue of cooking on Shabbos. However, there is a concern of lush, which is kneading. Now, the Shulchan Aruch in chapter 321, it prohibits preparing masses that clump together because it resembles kneading. However, if you have there are three changes that one would employ to change from the ordinary method, and then you would be allowed to have overnight oatmeal on Shabbos. What are the three things? Number one, it has to be loose, pourable mixtures. It can't be thick. It is forbidden to make a thick mixture on Shabbos. So if you have a lot of liquid, that's number one. Number two, you also need, you need all three to be permissible. If one usually pours the oats into the bowl and then adds the cold water, you must do it in an abnormal way. So the way to do it would be do the milk or the water first in the bowl and then pour the oats on top. So you made a shinoi, a change from the normal way. And the third thing is that you don't stir it in the regular manner with a spoon, but you stir it, let's say, with the handle of the spoon. You do it you do the stirring in an unusual way. In this way, you could have oatmeal. I don't know how good it is, overnight oatmeal, but if you needed oatmeal on Shabbos, that would be a way to have oatmeal that's no cooking at all. It's all cold. But of course, the best way to have oatmeal on Shabbos, my suggestion is make it before Shabbos and put it in your refrigerator. But if you make it before Shabbos, you have no problems. But if you didn't, this would be a way to have oatmeal on Shabbos. Again, it's touching on the law that we're learning in our Gemara about making a shatisa on Shabbos that everyone agrees would be permissible if it's loose. Okay, so now I'm going to let's go over the Gemara that we learned yesterday, and
you can also have it after Kiddush.
What does that mean?
No, my wife was saying, that you're not supposed to have no oatmeal, before you hear Kiddush. So my response was have it after Kiddush.
Right. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people are lenient if you're going to be hungry during davening. And there's a source in Shulchan Aruch. If you're hungry during davening, you are allowed to eat before. You're called a chayla. So there is room for leniency, but there are some people who are extra careful not to, and that's fine. But there is the Shulchan Aruch says that it's whatever, you could choose what you want. If you want to eat before davening, if you're going to be hungry, you can. But if you don't want to eat before davening, even though you're going to be hungry, you can choose that option as well. So, either way is fine. The Gemara that we learned yesterday, it mentioned that there's an argument what the bracha on shatisa is. Now, shatisa, we said, was a flour that was roasted. Either the kernels were roasted when they were moist. Somehow it seems like it's a very good flour. And it's mixed with water, salt, oil. One place Rashi says it's mixed with honey. And so it's some type of mixture. And this is what shatisa is. And it seems like it's an argument between Rav and Shmuel, what the bracha on shatisa would be. Yes, Robert.
And we're on 38A. Is that where we are?
Yeah.
Okay,
I'm not reading it inside yet.
No, I understand. I just, for the general.
38A, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Ben, yeah.
Yeah, you just explained while people are going to the kitchen before praying. There's always people
in
coming
your
out
shul?
of the kitchen.
You're talking about in shul or in your house?
Yeah, in shul.
Okay. So the Gemara mentioned that there's an argument between Rav and Shmuel. At least it seems like there's an argument, but the Gemara quickly says no. Rav Chizda tells us it's not an argument. They're talking about different types. There's shatisa that's thick, and there's shatisa that is thin. The shatisa that's thin, the bracha would be shahakol. The shatisa that's thick, the bracha would be bayrei mine mezainos. So again, you have flour in this mixture, but yet we're gonna recite a shahakol if it's a very thin mixture. And the Gemara explains that when it's thin, it's made for medicine. Now, the way we learned it yesterday, which I think is the simpler way of learning, is that the reason why the bracha is shahakol is because it's for medicine. It sort of is downgraded. Your purpose of eating this food is not really for the nourishment. It tastes good, maybe tastes okay. You're getting benefit. You are enjoying it, but your purpose is for the medicine, and that's why you're eating it. And therefore, the bracha doesn't have. We don't say, oh, you're eating this type of sustenance because you're not eating it for sustenance. We don't say the bracha that that's not really the purpose here. The goal, the point is that you're eating it for medicine, and therefore it would fall into the category of a shahakol bracha. The bracha would be shahakol, and on that, Rav Yosef has a big question. He says, "What the liquid shatisa, the one that's loose, the loose shatisa, that is a medicine, and that's why the bracha is shahakol, because it's a medicine. You're eating it for medicine purposes, and the bracha would be shahakol." He says, how could that be? There's a brisa in the Tractate Shabbos that says that everyone agrees you're allowed to make this shatus, which is the same as shatisa. You're allowed to make this on Shabbos. You can mix it. You can mix it on Shabbos. It's not a problem of what we were talking about earlier, kneading. We don't have the issue of kneading, even though when it comes to something thick, there's an issue, of course, of kneading. Even if you make a chain, the Gemara there talks about mixing water with bran, and talks about, is bran something that becomes kneaded or not? Like certain foods don't mix so much or not. So it mentions over there that there might be leniency. One opinion is more lenient if you do something differently than the norm. Another opinion isn't. But everyone agrees that by Chashin you can mix the shatus on Shabbos. You can mix this shatisa on Shabbos, and it's not a problem. And you could also drink the zaysaim hamitzvah, which is the Egyptian zaysaim. And we mentioned that zaysaim hamitzvah is some type of a food that is also used as a medicine. It's both. It's a medicine and it's a food. People that have it as medicine, it's for like constipation or diarrhea, whatever it is. It's something also that's permissible on Shabbos. So you're allowed to do these two things on Shabbos. And the understanding of Rabbi Yosef is, why would you be allowed to mix this shatus on Shabbos? Now, medicine you're not allowed to have on Shabbos. We just learned that medicine is generally prohibited on Shabbos. Why would a person be allowed to do this? It must be that it's not medicine. And even the Zeishem HaMitzri, you must say that even though some people have it as medicine, but it's not, it's also a regular food. There are certain foods that, tea is something people drink. And it's also something, chicken soup. Chicken soup is something people have every Friday night. It's also something people take when they're sick. So it's a food that's, Zeishem HaMitzri, no problem. It's fine. It's okay. You're allowed to have Zeishem. You're allowed to drink chicken. You're allowed to have chicken soup on Shabbos. You're allowed to have Zeishem HaMitzri on Shabbos. And you're allowed to mix the shatus on Shabbos. So if you're telling me that shatus or shatisa is a medicine, then it would not be allowed on Shabbos. So if that's the case, it must be that shatisa is not, even though the loose shatisa is not a medicine. And the bracha on it should be Bayrei Minim Zainais, not a medicine. And so this Rav Yosef is asking a question on the way Rav Chizda explained that Rav holds that the bracha is shahakol, and the reason is because it's a medicine. The bracha, that's not true. The bracha, it's not a medicine, and maybe the bracha should not be shahakol. This is the way we're learning the Gemara. Now, and you see that it's not a medicine because it says it's allowed on Shabbos, and obviously you're not preparing it for after Shabbos because you're not allowed to prepare from Shabbos to after Shabbos. That's another prohibition must be that you're having this shatisa on Shabbos, and it says you're allowed to mix it. Must be that it's not a medicine. Okay, it's not a medicine. Then we have to reevaluate the question, the law of the bracha. So the Gemara answered, the rabbi that answers this, his name is Abaye. Abaye answers this. He says, you don't think that it's a medicine? We have a Mishnah that says that any food person could eat for a medicine purpose, and any drink a person could drink, you're allowed to have it. And the question would be, what does it mean by saying any food a person could eat for medicine? If it's a food, you see that anything that's a food, you could eat it for medicine. What is the word koil? What is the word all things that are foods could be eaten for medicine? It's implying that he's like being very inclusive. Anything that's a food you can have for medicine. It means as long as it's a item, as long as it's something it's a food item, even though people don't normally have it for medicine, but if it's a food item, you're allowed to take it for medicine purposes. That's why it says kol ha'ichlin, all foods person could have for medicine, and all drinks a person could drink, the same thing. As long as it's a drink, a person could have it. And Ella, my islach lamein. So the Gemara says, so how are you going to explain this? Why would it be allowed? The answer is that the person, it looks like the person is eating a food, and because it looks like he's eating a food, or he's having in mind for a food, that's why it's permissible. So going back to the case of shatisa, you could say the same thing. That in the case of shatisa, you could say it looks like the person is eating it as a food, and it's not a problem that it's a medicine, because it also it's a food item. These are foods. These are the flour, the salt, the water. These are foods. The honey. It's food. It's foods. You're having food. You're eating it. You're having in mind medicine, but no one knows what you have in mind, and therefore it looks like you're eating it as a food, and it looks like you're having in mind for food, and the healing comes automatically. But your intent is the food. That's the Gemara's conclusion. And really, we should read this inside. I'm going to take a few minutes of your time. I hope it's not a problem. Yes, David.
Yeah, it sounded like you were saying that if the thing is for a medicine and not for a food, the bracha will be downgraded.
That's the way we're explaining it now. Yes.
Right. So what if a person doesn't like oranges in particular, but he has a sore throat, so he's eating this orange in order to help his throat? Does that mean he makes a shakol on the orange instead of beret pre-hates? That's my question.
According to this view, again, this is not necessarily the halacha. And the reason I say it's not necessarily the halacha is because there is one place in Shulchan Aruch that brings this down as like a side point, but this is not the way the halacha learns this Gemara. This is the simple way of learning it, but it is once brought down like this in Shulchan Aruch, and therefore I'm not telling you it's totally not halacha. So according to this way of learning, that would be the halacha. Okay, that would be the halacha, according to this way of learning the Gemara. Yes, Edith.
Yes, I'm just wondering why things can't change as far as rabbinic, because at the time that the rabbis made these decisions or decrees or whatever, they made the best decision they could with the way the world was at that time. in their
Right, good
time.
question.
But the
Yeah.
world has changed and they didn't have the foresight on how it would change. And I feel like, why do we have to be so archaic? I mean,
Right.
some of these things sound
Okay,
to
that's a
me
good
like,
question.
like
Well,
we're
I'm not going
going
to answer.
backward.
I'm not going to answer you. It's a good question.
Okay.
I'm not going to answer you now, and the reason I'm not
Okay.
going to answer you now is we really don't have time.
Okay.
It's really I'm already 7 minutes late. But it's a good question. Maybe we'll talk about it on Sunday a little. It's something you could look into and as well if you want. You could look it up online. But there is an answer to it, and I have an answer that I want to share with you. But I really don't. I don't have time. So the Gemara inside. We're going to read the Gemara inside. The Gemara says, Ella, where maybe about 20 lines up from the bottom of the page. Ella ma islach lameimar. We're on 38a. 38a, 20 lines up from the bottom of the page. Ella ma islach lameimar. What will you say? How can you explain this Mishnah that talks about taking food that's medicine on Shabbos? It must be gavra liachilo kamachaven. The person, it looks like he's eating, his intent is for eating. So even though he might actually have intent for medicine, but the intent that's visible is for eating, and therefore it would be allowed to have this. It's a food, so it looks like he's eating, and therefore it would be allowed on Shabbos. Similarly here, in the case of Shatisa, the person has in mind for food, and therefore it looks, in other words, it looks like he has in mind for food, and therefore you're allowed to have Shatisa, a loose Shatisa on Shabbos, and even though it does heal, but it would be allowed on Shabbos because it looks like food, because it is food. Susan, do you have a question? Okay, so now the Gemara says, Lishna Achrina, another wording of this. It doesn't really change much, but there's another way of wording this. Elamayas lach lameimar. How are you going to explain this Mishnah that says it's permissible? And the answer is, Gavra la'achilo kamachavet. The person, it looks like he's having in mind for food, urafua memelo kahavya, and it naturally will heal, but his intent maybe is for food. Looks like that. Hachanami here also la'achilo kamachaven. The food, it looks like he's having in mind for food, and and the healing will come automatically. So that is the way the Gemara answers this issue of that Rabbi Yosef had asked that how would you be allowed to have Shatisa? How could Shatisa be a medicine? And the answer is that it is a food. It's mainly a medicine, and mainly a medicine is allowed on Shabbos if it's a food. If it was only medicine, like some, something that tastes awful and people don't eat it at all, it's only a medicine, then of course that would be a problem to take on Shabbos. That would be prohibited. But if something's a food, but it's happens to be mainly for medicine, then it would be okay. Yes, Ezra.
So if it's a food, and if it happens to also produce a byproduct of being medicinal, then it's okay.
That
Like
would be
chicken,
the, yeah,
like chicken soup.
chicken soup. Correct. Correct.
Okay.
Now, the other way of learning this Gemara, I'm just going to tell it to you outside, is that the reason that the bracha changes is not because of medicine. And medicine causes a bracha to change. It's because it's very loose and it's drank, it's a liquid. Because of it being a liquid, that's why the bracha changes. Now, the Gemara is discussing. Tell her to be quiet for one more minute because I'm going to finish my class. Tell her just one more minute. Okay, well, I'm finished in 1 minute. Okay, I'm gonna fix it in a minute. Thank you. Okay, I'm gonna fix it. So yeah. Okay. So the explanation is that our Gemara is discussing the fact that we called it a medicine, but that's not the main point here. The main point is what the bracha is. And the bracha is not based on the fact that it's a medicine. We happen to mention that it's a medicine. It's the way it's drank. How, why are you making a loose shatisa? That's loose shatisa. Why would you want a loose shat? Why would you want it to be such a liquidy shatisa? It was many. That's it's used for medicine. And the Gemara on that has a question. What do you mean? That's used for medicine? It's not true. You see a Mishnah Brisa there's used for medicine. That is not used for medicine. And that is what the Gemara is discussing. But the main point of what the bracha is not because of the medicine element of it, but rather because it's drank as a liquid, and it's not meant to be a form of satisfaction that satisfies a person's hunger. It's not meant to satisfy one's heart. And if you want it, I'm just going to read for you the in the Seder Brachas Hanen, and a summary of the laws of Brachas from the Alter Rebbe. So he brings here that if you have flour from one of the 5 species that was boiled and mixed with water or other liquids, if it becomes soft and thin so much that it's only fit for drinking and not to satisfy one's heart at all, which I guess means satisfy one's hunger, or I don't know, satisfy one's heart. But if it doesn't satisfy one's heart at all, you only say a bracha shahakal. But if it is a little thick, that it's fit to eat and satisfy one's heart, even if it's not thick enough to chew. So you're not going to chew it, but it is thick enough to be satisfaction to one's heart. You would recite the bracha b'min mazaynes and then al hamichya afterwards. So that is the way the Alter Rebbe brings this law, following this way of learning and not following the other way of learning, that something that's a medicine loses its bracha. So at least that's what it seems from the way the Alter Rebbe writes in Seder Brachas Hanen, and that the main explanation of the Gemara is this explanation, that it's based on liquid versus solid rather than food versus medicine. Maybe we'll talk a little more about it on Sunday. Everyone have a wonderful Shabbos, and thank you for allowing me to take a little extra of your time.
Have a great
Thank you,
Shabbos,
Rabbi.
Rebbe. Thank
Thank you,
you.
Rabbi.
Thank you,
Rabbi.
Rabbi. Good Shabbos.
Shabbat shalom.
Fabulous
Shabbos,
class.
everybody.